What the Alabama results mean for Ohio. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Laura Bischoff, State House reporter for the Dayton Daily News, Jim Siegel, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch, Shannon Jones, former state senator, and Sandy Tice, director of Progress Ohio. Ohio candidates and political strategists are trying to figure out what this week's upset in Alabama means for them heading into the 2018 election. For the first time in a generation, Alabama elected a Democrat to the U.S. Senate. Doug Jones rode a wave of anti-Donald Trump sentiment and capitalized on an opponent facing allegations he sexually assaulted teenagers decades ago to claim a narrow victory over Roy Moore in the special election.
I have always believed that the people of Alabama had more in common than to divide us. We have work to do to reach across with those that didn't vote for us to try to find that common ground. I'm pledging to do that tonight.
Moore declined to concede defeat, but Republicans in Alabama and around the country did it for him, some with a bit of relief that they no longer have to answer for him. The question now is, what impact will his defeat have on Republicans who want to hang on to that alt-right platform? Jim Siegel, there are a few Republicans, Josh Mandel, Jim Renacci, Mary Taylor to some degree, who are really aligning themselves with Donald Trump. How does this result affect their campaigns going forward?
Well, it'll be interesting to see that, because I was trying to think how to describe it. Are they going to embrace Donald Trump? Are we going to fist bump Donald Trump? Or are we going to stiff arm Donald Trump by the time this is over? And, you know, coming off of Alabama, coming off of Virginia, where not only was did a Democrat get elected governor, but the Democrats picked up 15 legislative seats. I mean, they basically had the same breakdown in their legislature as we do here, and in their House, and I mean, landslide. So yeah, there is definitely got to be concern, and I know there is concern about just how much you can cozy up to Donald Trump now and his policies, considering that he is consistently seeing polling in the low 30s now. The tax plan, they're moving on. The next big thing is the tax plan. That is deeply unpopular according to polls. Yep. We just saw a net neutrality ruling that, for those who understand it, it's unpopular. There's a wave of things coming, and these midterm elections tend to be bad for the party in charge as it is.
Shannon, are Republicans, there's some Republicans who basically said, we're glad he lost, and now we can move on. We don't have to answer for him for the next 8 or 9 months. Right?
Well, I think that's true. I mean, he was a pretty extreme candidate, a flawed candidate. But there's no question that if the election were held today, I think Republicans, it's not in their favor based on the environment. But at the same time, the election's a long way away. A lot of things can happen. And, from the gubernatorial standpoint, when you have some big actions coming up, so folks are going to have to pick their running mates, that's going to sort of change the narrative a little bit. And quite frankly, with this DeWine Husted alignment, I think it's probably the strongest ticket out there, and it's probably the strongest that the Republicans could be putting forward.
Roy Moore, Laura, was a very flawed candidate, obviously, but he only lost by less than 2 points. So it shows that there's still a lot of strength in the anti-establishment brand.
Sure. However, Donald Trump took Alabama by 28 points just a year ago, and then the exit polls showed that really the voters were split on support for him. So I think the Trump brand has really taken a beating in the Deep South in Alabama, as we saw. And the other thing is that there was a really big turnout, higher than expected turnout in Alabama, and I think that it helped the Democrats that they ran Doug Jones, who's the guy who put away 2 Klansmen who were responsible for the 4 little girls getting murdered and firebombed in a church in 1963. Yep. So I think that helped, really draw a contrast between the 2 candidates.
So how can Democrats, Sandy, take what the lessons learned from Alabama and bring them to Ohio?
I think the Republican brand is pretty toxic. It is time for a change, and having a 70-something-year-old white guy with a white guy running mate at the top of their ticket is really not reflective of the mood of the voters. So I think we're going to see a lot of pushback on the unpopular policy. Jim talked about net neutrality and this tax giveaway to rich people. Meanwhile, we're not funding the children's health insurance program. We're still trying to gut the Affordable Care Act, and the healthcare economy is really important to Ohio. So I think all those economic issues finally are going to be on the Democratic side of the ledger, and women are mad. And what was Doug Jones got 90-some% of the vote of black women.
Yeah. Well, like over African Americans overall, I think
Yeah.
it's like 95%.
Yeah.
But don't Democrats have to be for something, not just be mad?
I think they are for something. I think they're for a lot of things. I think they support the healthcare economy. They support women having autonomy over their own bodies. They support good public schools, and they support accountability in the charter schools. And I think you're going to hear them talk about all those things.
Shannon, do Republicans, Mike DeWine, John Husted, do they have to break from Donald Trump? Do they have to denounce him?
Well, look, I don't know if they're going to have to break with him or not. The reality is I think they need to bring forward an agenda that working class and middle class voters really respond to. And so that's really the challenge before both parties, quite frankly. It's not just an agenda that's been lacking with the Republican Party. The Democrats have really failed to put something forward that that people can rally behind. So I think that's really what voters are going to want to see from either ticket.
Okay. Our next topic, a few developments in the race for governor this week. Republican Jim Renacci has a running mate. The congressman has chosen Cincinnati City Council member Amy Murray to serve as his would-be lieutenant governor. Murray is in her second term on Cincinnati City Council. She used to work at Procter & Gamble. On the Democratic side, former Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell has endorsed Connie Pillich in her race for governor, and her competitor Richard Cordray hired another fundraiser, the same woman who just finished raising money for Alabama's Senator-elect Jones. Antonia Koch helped raise $10 million in the final months of his campaign. Shannon Jones, you're from the Cincinnati area. Who is Amy Murray? What can she bring to that campaign?
Well, I mean, she's a well-known female city council person, a Republican, seems seemingly relatively moderate on a lot of issues. She's a consensus builder. She's certainly someone who people like, and I think right now in politics, likability counts for an awful lot.
Consensus builder and moderate. Does that fit with Jim Renacci?
Well, look, I think that's always been how tickets have been. It's capitalizing on the candidate at the top of the ticket, their strength and weaknesses, and choosing a running mate. That's not that unusual, is it?
So there's a ticket, gender divided, man and woman, that has to help a little as far as attracting some women votes, right, Sandy?
The top of the ticket is what really drives it, and the two Republicans who are so far in the Trump camp and have littered the state with all sorts of Trumpian statements are Josh Mandel and Jim Renacci, and they're not going to be able to eat those comments.
Laura, how does this shape up, this ticket here?
Well, you know, what I think is interesting is that primaries can be very unpredictable. You know, the establishment is the DeWine Husted ticket for sure. Yep. But in a primary, you know, the Trump brand has been damaged, I would say, in a general election for sure. But I think in a primary, he may have some staying power. I think that the Republican base is still, you know, stoically with him. And so Renacci, I kind of thought that a Taylor Renacci ticket would have been better positioned to kind of outflank on the right and give Husted and DeWine, or DeWine and Husted a solid challenge.
Yeah. So Jim, that puts the rest, that speculation that Mary Taylor could not have run for lieutenant governor, but she could have been at the top of the ticket with Jim Renacci.
Yeah, so the question now is, well, who does Mary Taylor pick? How long, you know, does she really stay in until the bitter end? It's certainly possible. I mean, you know, for someone like her, I don't know that there's another path that she's looking for politically to go into. I mean, there's been talk of her running for Congress, but I don't know that, you know, that she's interested in that.
She said she denied the rumors of that.
Yeah, that's what I said. I don't, you know. Everyone denies running for something until they do. I don't, but I have not heard anything that suggests that she is interested.
I do think that if Renacci and Taylor both stay in, that they split kind of the base vote, and that gives a clear path for DeWine and Husted.
Ed Rendell, does he fire up Ohio Democrats? He's a popular guy, former head of the DNC. He's on MSNBC all the time.
He is. There has to be a strange backstory to that one. I just saw some polling on that race that was proprietary. And she and Nan Whaley and Joe Schiavone were all in single digits. The only two in double digits were Betty Sutton and Rich Cordray. They were pretty close. There was a big chunk of undecided voters. And I still think that the Democratic nominee will be Rich Cordray or Betty Sutton.
But I mean, the Democrats, they just have this whole field of number of candidates who are, you know, they're not flawed, but they're not well known either. And so, yeah, at what point does everyone stop being the candidate with 7 to 12 points in the polls and somebody rise to the top? I mean, obviously, I think most believe that Rich Cordray has the potential to be that person, but it doesn't mean others can't do it. I mean, Joe Schiavone just cut an ad that I thought was actually pretty good. Him in the gym boxing.
Because he's a boxer.
He is a boxer, and it's an effective ad. The problem is right now it's only online. So until he can get that thing out there with some statewide on television, then I don't know how effective it'll be in swaying votes. But it'll be and they have to soon start picking lieutenant governor candidates too.
Right, I think a key moment is going to be at the end of January when the campaign finance reports are due. That's when they'll have to put up the numbers and see and show how strong they are in terms of how much backing they have.
Do you see Rich Cordray trying to team up with Betty Sutton?
I know a lot of Democrats are saying Rich and Betty or Betty and Rich, and the polling showed him incredibly strong in Central Ohio and her incredibly strong in Northern and Northeast Ohio. The two women congresswomen, Marcia Fudge from Cleveland and Marcy Kaptur from Toledo, both endorsed her. Those women don't stick their noses out unless they plan on delivering. So there's a lot of private chatter inside the Democratic Party about who should be on top and what should happen next.
It would be stunning, I think, if the Democrats did not have a woman on their ticket, whichever ticket ends up emerging.
Yeah.
So no Richard Cordray and Bill O'Neill. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's Richard Cordray and Dennis Kucinich.
Yes. That'd be fun. Jerry Springer's still out there.
He said he wasn't running.
For governor.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, actually, it could be a Kucinich-Springer ticket.
All right, marijuana growing is underway in Ohio, well, at least the preparation for it. A large-scale grower this week broke ground on its facility in Yellow Springs. Some of the losing bidders for growing licenses continue to complain about the process. One of them kicked off his effort to legalize all marijuana in Ohio. Jimmy Gould is going to the ballot again. This time, the market would not be controlled by a handful of investors, something that voters shot down last year.
That means that nobody's going to be guaranteed a spot. It'll be a free market system for adult 21 and over, period.
Laura Bischoff, pretty simple. Will the ballot language be that simple?
Probably not. It never is. I think that they're smart enough to know not to structure it like they did with the 2015 Responsible Ohio one that went down, I think, almost by a 2-to-1 margin. But they're the only group that's ever gotten marijuana question on the ballot. So in that regard, I believe them when they say they're going to do it. And I think the Department of Commerce had a pretty vociferous defense of its process just this week at the Marijuana Advisory Committee.
The awarding of the license.
The awarding of the, there's 97 losers and 12 winners. So there's plenty of people out there to complain about it. And one of the things that they're really making a big deal about is there was this consultant guy named Trevor Bozeman who was hired as an expert in the field to help score the applications. And he's the convicted drug dealer that they're complaining about. But I got the actual paperwork of his conviction, and he was a 20-year-old college student who was busted in his dorm room for having a large baggie of marijuana, packaging, scales, and cash. And Jacqueline Williams, the director of Commerce Department, said that had that same circumstances happened today in Pennsylvania, it wouldn't have been a felony.
Yeah.
So where's the second chance? That was 13 years ago. The guy went on to get a PhD, and as far as we know, no other problems with the law.
If the ballot issue for the recreational marijuana, the legalization of that, does not include sort of specific groups of investors, can they get the money? If it's a free market, can the free market support a campaign to get it on the
I think they
ballot?
can. I think it's very popular. There are a lot of people who want to invest in it, not just the growing, but the manufacturing side of it. And I think if they would be smart to marry it with some sort of criminal justice reform. People like Laura just talked about this person who had this felony. There are a lot of people who have records that they shouldn't or they should be able to get expunged. And I think that would be a good public service for the people backing this amendment. It would be helpful to people who live in the state.
Shannon, this reminds me of the casino issue where it was on the ballot for like 12 years.
Yeah.
Is this going to be the same thing? It's going to be on the ballot until it passes?
Probably. I don't, whenever you're dealing with the opportunity for people to make a lot of money, I think, people like to buy some sort of preferential, treatment. And we can talk about, well, this is going to be an open market situation. I just don't think really Ohioans are there. And, I just wonder what kind of support would really be for that kind of funding of that kind of ballot initiative.
I don't think that they have to go out and do some sort of heavy lift on the funding. I think Jimmy Gould is a fairly wealthy guy, and I think he's mad enough that he didn't get a license, and he's mad enough that he's just going to spend his own money. That it takes like $1 million to get something on the ballot, and they can just go from there. He did say he's not prepared to spend another $28 million on it, but I could see him putting up some money to get on the ballot.
And the longer this takes for them to get the medical marijuana up and running, the more there is going to be support growing for, and no pun intended, for an issue like this, full recreational marijuana, because right now we still have nothing, even and not necessarily, we're not like we're behind schedule necessarily, but this is not a rapid process to get this thing up and running and going. And the longer we have to wait, the longer folks are sitting around going, what happened to that marijuana issue I thought we were supposed to have? Then it allows folks like Jimmy Gould to step up and say, well, I'm ready to take this forward again. What
about the noise out of Washington? It's just kind of rumblings that, Jeff Sessions, a big anti-marijuana advocate, attorney general. It's still illegal federally. Do we worry that all this could be for naught if the feds start cracking down on marijuana, or is that logically going to happen? There's just too much money involved now.
Well, I don't think we worry because we don't have any skin in the game. But if I was one of those folks who put all this money into getting a license and breaking ground, et cetera, I would still be pretty cautious about it.
Jeff Sessions has lots of other things to worry about.
Could be. All right, our next topic. Infant mortality remains stubbornly high in Ohio. The rate among African American babies is more than twice as high as white babies. And despite stepped-up efforts to prevent it, infant mortality actually increased a bit last year. A new report from the Health Policy Institute of Ohio recommends 127 possible remedies. Most of them go beyond direct health care. The report says the state must improve housing, transportation, education, and address issues like racism, violence, and stress in the workplace. Shannon Jones, when you were in the state Senate, you called for this report. It's a big lift. Can we lift it?
Well, look, there's no panacea out there. There's no silver bullet. We're not going to do it overnight. But what I think is important about this report is it really sets the stage for the policy conversation going forward that says, clinical care and access to clinical care is necessary, but it is certainly not sufficient to start to drive things down. And so now that there are sort of a plethora of choices, it may inspire policymakers who have an interest in a variety of different areas to start to look at those areas through this lens. And that's really what's important about what they put forward.
We're looking at government funding for housing assistance, transportation, or is it more private sector?
The government needs to get involved. There has to be a holistic approach. And Senator, thank you for taking this on. She and Charlita Tavares took it on when other people weren't even acknowledging it was a problem, and all the women got together. But you mentioned racism. If you are a wealthy black woman, your chance of having an infant death are higher than a poor white woman because of the stress that we put on communities of color. We have a lot of work to do.
What's going to be the response among current lawmakers, Laura, to this report?
I think it's kind of unclear. I think that Senator Jones was sort of the champion of it in the Ohio Senate, and Charlita Tavares is still in the Senate and can continue to push for it. But they have to be able to get some political capital behind it.
Well, here's the important piece, though. The thing about the social determinants of health is that you could look at any metric. So whether you're looking at the metric of infant mortality or you're looking at things like opiate abuse, a lot of this comes down to the social determinants of health. And so for the first time ever, while there may not be the strongest champions in the Senate or the House around infant mortality, there are plenty of strong champions around things like our opiate crisis. And this is a way to view, policy solutions, because look, the General Assembly has done a lot on opiates, for example, and we're not winning this battle. So perhaps this provides and invites a different kind of discussion to say, let's start looking at these policy challenges through a completely different lens, and maybe we can make some progress there.
One of the challenges I think you're going to have is because some of this list it could potentially be very expensive. And you do definitely have members in the legislature who say, okay, if I'm going to spend X, what is the Y result at the end? How much is infant mortality going to be reduced? You see the same thing with the drug problem. You see this with education. If I'm going to give you more money, to these schools, how much better are your students going to do? It's the same. They want to see tangible results. This type of issue, it's tough, and that is why this is. This could be a I think it's right. I think it will let them see this through a different lens. But when it comes time to write the checks, I'm not sure how it's going to be received.
Did the study look at how Medicaid expansion is affecting this? I know because it's still early in Medicaid expansion relative to the infant mortality.
That really
numbers.
wasn't the purpose of it. I mean, because again, the whole point is to say we know that access to health care, particularly of women of childbearing age and in the prenatal period of time, is a necessary component to having healthy birth outcomes. We know that for a fact. But that's only 20% of what determines this. And this is really just trying to change the conversation to say, what happens in people's communities and their environments, where they live are a much bigger factor. And how can we view policy conversation through that lens to not do everything at once, but perhaps to pick an area and really be able to be true to the evidence that's out there on best practices, and to hold ourselves accountable to the results. I think that's fair. If we're going to make investments, we got to see proof of those.
Okay. I know the Smart City project in Columbus transportation, one of the hooks on that was trying to use better transportation in the Linden area to help the fight infant mortality. So we'll see. Our last topic, Governor Kasich has another abortion restriction bill awaiting his signature. The state Senate this week joined the House in passing a bill prohibiting women from getting abortions because of a Down syndrome diagnosis. If it becomes law, doctors who perform such abortions would face a 4th-degree felony, possible jail time, and could lose their medical licenses. Women seeking the abortions would not be punished. Lawmakers in North Dakota, Indiana, and Louisiana have passed similar laws, only to have them blocked by the courts. Sandy Tice, I think all of us know families or children with Down syndrome, have friends and families with them. What is wrong with prohibiting abortion for just that reason?
It is the woman's choice. It is not the government's choice. And like you said, other states have had these very similar to this and have had them thrown out. I am so tired of Mike DeWine and his fiscal conservative allies passing laws and then sticking us with the legal fees to lose. He didn't support marriage equality, so he took a marriage case to the Supreme Court. We paid the salaries and the benefits for people on his staff to defend it, and then we paid $1.3 million in legal fees to the people who won.
But he's defending the state law that's passed by the legislature and if it's signed by the governor.
But when Lee Fisher was Attorney General, I remember him testifying and saying and warning the lawmakers that certain things that they were doing were going to get thrown out. And I remember Betty Montgomery sitting on the sidelines when she knew things would get thrown out. This guy wants to be governor, he wants a promotion, and he's using our money to promote his ridiculous social agenda.
Well, he didn't pass the law.
But
the legislature passed the law.
He can intervene and say just what you said. All these other states, if he would have said all these other states passed it and it's unconstitutional, I think there would have been a much different conversation in the General Assembly.
Really?
I do.
You really think that?
I do. First of all, you guys would have been astonished that the fact that he stood up to them.
Is John Kasich going to sign it?
I think he's either going to sign it or let it become law without his signature. I would be really surprised if he vetoed it. But yeah, this has been overturned in other states, and because the way it's set now is pretty much you can set the line at viability, which is 20 to 22 weeks, and say you can't have an abortion after that. But before that time, the courts are continuously saying you cannot restrict an abortion, and so this would do that. Plus, it climbs into the mind of a woman in a way that I don't think we've seen in past abortion bills.
In the mind of a doctor. How is a doctor going to know if the woman doesn't tell him? So we shall see. Time for our final off-the-record parting shots. Sandy Tice, you're up first.
I hope that the Me Too movement and the rise of the women puts more women in leadership. You've seen that famous saying that said, what would happen if the 3 wise men were wise women? They would have brought sensible gifts, cleaned out the stable, asked for directions, and there would be peace on earth. I believe that.
Jen.
Well, since we're bumping up against the filing deadline, and that means that our gubernatorial candidates need to pick running mates, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think Rich Cordray not only is going to pick a woman, I think he's going to pick Nan Whaley. And I would say that Mary Taylor is going to pick State Senator Lou Terhar to be her running mate.
Interesting. Jim.
Kind of along that theme, I will predict that the Democratic governor field is going to thin out faster than the Republican field at this point. You'll see some of them drop, whether because they get named as LG candidates or for other reasons.
Okay.
And I'm not predicting this is going to be the matchup, but if it is a DeWine Cordray rematch, it'll be the first time in more than 60 years that a former attorney general becomes Ohio governor. The last guy to do it was C. William O'Neill in the 1950s.
Wow. The FCC did away with net neutrality this week, so that means in Columbus we have competition among cable providers, which is great, but what that means is even more of those annoying mailers that we get from all the cable companies. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online, Twitter, Facebook, and on demand, each episode at our website, wosu.org. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.